Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. My name is Biddulph-Krentar. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Leadership Sims. Just a couple of logistical things before we get started. You see an image on your screen, hopefully, that is the go-to webinar control panel. Throughout the webinar, you'll be muted. If you have something to say or would like to contribute, you can click the Raise My Hand button towards the left there. There's a green arrow pointing towards a palm. Or you can ask a question in the questions or chat box, and I'll be monitoring those throughout the webinar. With that, I'll introduce Ken Spiro, our CEO and founder, to take over from here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ken Spiro, as Brian mentioned. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Leadership Sims. And on behalf of all of us at ELS, I wanted to welcome you all to our webinar today and to thank you all for joining. We'd also like to wish you and your families all the best in navigating this current crisis, both safely and healthfully, as well as your extended school communities. Our schools are on the front line of this situation, engaging and educating our children of all ages, we at ELS would like to support this effort in any way that we can. Our specific focus is on supporting the adults, the leaders, and the educators in our schools to both help them, on the one hand, make better decisions, and on the other hand, to develop the resilience to also deal with the consequences or blowback of their choices. Furthermore, we also want to enable them to keep their teams engaged and connected. Online simulations are a unique tool to help with both of these objectives. Sims harness the power and the adage that experience is the best teacher, allowing us to manufacture experiences around real problems of practice in realistic and authentic contexts. And for those of you who have participated or viewed our last webinar, you saw how we use Sims to deal with complicated topics such as cultural competence in an online format. With that in mind, we hope that you will find the session both engaging and interesting. Oh, sorry. However, as we know, our current situation is unprecedented. Nobody has experience in managing in this kind of situation. So when it comes to manufacturing experience, what experience would that be? But fortunately, that doesn't mean that there isn't expertise or related experiences that we can learn from to help inform how we approach the current circumstances we find ourselves in. As I look at it, we've gone from, on the one hand, traditional schooling in the classroom, where everyone now being at home, and both students and staff, and needing to teach virtually. Now, this is a pretty broad or wide chasm that, in theory, would seem to be pretty difficult for us to span. But when we think about this, maybe there are some areas of expertise that we can tap into that maybe provide a span, maybe a bridge to help span some of this, so that we're not necessarily having to get all the way across. In particular, from a leadership perspective, rural district leadership have been wrestling with this kind of distributed leadership for a long time. So are there lessons that our principals and district leaders can take from that work, right? We're all kind of rural now. So is there something that can be gleaned from that? From the virtual learning perspective, virtual schools have been doing this daily for quite some time. So what can we take from their expertise and their experience? So to help explore this chasm and the potential bridges that we have, that we are now facing, we've assembled a panel representing some deep expertise and experience in each of these areas. First, we have Dr. Chandra Walker. She's the Director of Leadership Development at Gwinnett County Public Schools, a bricks and mortar district. And she has spent 22 years in public education, both leading as well as developing leaders in schools. Dr. Jan Miller is the Dean of the College of Education at the University of West Alabama, which was the first in the nation to develop a program to teach rural leadership for administrators, and has spent 25 years prior to that teaching and leading in schools. And Mr. Erik Hanson is the director of the Appleton eSchool at Appleton Area School District in Wisconsin, and also the director of Wisconsin eSchool Network. And he's been leading and teaching online for more than 10 years. So with that, actually, just before I turn it over, when we're done with the discussion, I hope that we'll have some time to introduce a new simulation that we've been working on, actually dealing with this challenge of leading in a pandemic, and hopefully to share the beginnings of that with you, so you have a chance to experience how simulation might be utilized to address the challenges that we are experiencing currently. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Walker, who will lead our conversation with our panelists.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you to everyone for being here. And today's webinar panel discussion is really designed to provide an opportunity for as Ken said, insights and discussion related to teaching, leading, and learning from 3 perspectives. So from an urban school setting, rural school setting, and a virtual school setting. And as Ken mentioned, now that teaching and learning across the country has really shifted to a virtual format, there are lessons to be learned about leadership, about maintaining a positive school climate, and maintaining high levels of student engagement and achievement. And as we engage in conversations with today's panel members, we encourage you to ask questions, to reflect, and really consider leadership decisions that must be made to maintain a focus on high quality learning experiences in our current environment, as well as beyond, as well as in the future. And so as we transition to our topic of conversation today, what we want to do is focus on those insights gained and think about what's working well, challenges that leaders may be facing in this environment, and strategies for maintaining a positive school climate that results in improved student outcomes. And so when I think about my school district, Gwinnett County Public Schools, and you see all of our information there on the screen, we have really seen leaders demonstrate a high level of innovation and creativity as they navigate this new normal. And recognizing that leadership matters really now more than ever, leaders that are maintaining communication with communities through daily video messages linked to their websites and school messenger. They're hosting virtual faculty meetings to make sure that that communication stays at a high level, but also that they are that the teachers are receiving clear guidance and clear direction. And they're also doing things like conducting virtual classroom tours. So I want to give you a little bit of a deeper dive into what some of this looks like in Gwinnett County Public Schools. And we are an urban school district. So let's talk about those classroom tours. So the classroom tours consist of teachers just signing up with their school leaders. It can be their assistant principal or their principal. And they're signing up with them to show them their online learning pages. And they are together, whether it's in Microsoft Teams or Zoom or another platform. But what they're doing is showing their leaders the work that they are using with students. They're talking about what they're most proud of, what students are engaged in, what their next steps are. And although this time is really informal, and the administrators make sure that that's known up front, it still though provides the leaders that opportunity to provide coaching and feedback, and that's important no matter what setting you're in. And it's really an opportunity to maintain a high level of engagement and support. Now, in faculty meetings, principals are discussing, of course, the core business of teaching and learning. They're discussing school and district initiatives, but they're also, which is so exciting, they're including video clips and photos of teachers and students engaged in learning. And they're adding an element, a higher level element of fun. A lot of our principals are starting off these virtual faculty meetings with games and with polls, and they are making sure to balance that business that needs to be discussed with just a wellness check. How are your families doing? What questions do you have? How are you doing? And so it's sort of a family meeting, but also, again, really focusing on teaching and learning. Some principals are even giving out prizes and they're doing like team building in some of the different chat rooms. So innovation has always been a strong suit in our district, and digital learning has as well. But what our leaders have recognized is that right here, right now, more intentional efforts and a higher level of focus has to be on those elements, those soft skills that may have come much more naturally face to face, and now being online and in this digital world, it still has to be done. They know that, but they're finding innovative ways to do that. In our faculty meetings, principals are being sure to allow time for question and answers from teachers. And what I find very heartwarming is they're taking time to create messages together to send to students. And a lot of these have also been posted on Facebook, and they're sharing it through email, just however we can get the word out to our school communities and families that we're in this together. Our focus is still our focus of high levels of engagement in teaching and learning, but we're ramping up that support and really giving our schools and our communities what they need right now. Leaders are also using Class Dojo, of course, email, but other methods of maintaining communication with parents is of critical importance right now. We're still sharing progress reports through our online platform, and we're finding that parents are very appreciative of our leaders for being so responsive right now and keeping their children's spirits high. And that what we know, and at the core of this, is the focus still is there, but for us to keep morale high and let students and parents know that that although we're not in the physical building, we're still moving forward, and we are still here for any kind of support they need. We're continuing in our district to work on what I think all of you in your districts are working on as well, and that is matters such as how else can we communicate? What else do you need for support? And making sure that any messages that we hear that we know we need to get out to our communities, that we're doing that. And we are making sure that our communications team offers those messages that are factual, that send a message of we're here for you. We're maintaining that focus, but again, that support is there, and that's really what we are all about. We find new ways to support families every day, and we're finding that that's working, and that's just something we really want to continue. And so that's a little bit of the urban school district type of lens and what our focus is. But Jan, I would love to hear from you, and I saw you nodding your head, and Erik, so I already can see that maybe our stories are similar, but let's hear from you about maybe your response to what I've said, and maybe how that looks in rural districts, and even from your university perspective, what is happening in the rural districts, and where are we alike, where are we different, and just any thoughts you have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chandra. And excuse me, yes, I was shaking my head. Kudos to you guys. You're doing such great work. And we are doing a lot of the same. I wanted to start with first, I am at the university level and we do work with the school leaders in the area. We have a consortium of superintendents that we meet with, on a quarterly basis. And so we've been able to solve a lot of the rural problems, through that leadership collaborative. And so obviously when the pandemic happened, one of the first things I did was to reach out to our rural communities and offer help, from the university. We've been in the online space for 15 years. We were one of the early starters in online learning here at the university. So we feel like, we got a good handle on what classes should look like and feel like. So we were willing to offer professional development, virtual to the superintendents. But I wanted to start when we talk about distributive leadership perspective, in a small rural towns, we have to wear many hats. I mean, you guys in large districts do too. I mean, that's not unique to us, but, we have to divide and conquer so often in rural areas, and we want to look for those experts, whoever they may be. And so, when you talk about moving content from face-to-face to online in the K-12 schools in a rural school where you may only have 12 teachers, that's a reality. And so of those 12 teachers, there's usually going to be one or two like tech savvy people who are just go-getters. And we're seeing that happen. We're seeing those teacher leaders, rise to the occasion, who are taking the lead to teach the other teachers, how do you do this? And so that's been very inspiring. Obviously, in small rural areas, there's a lot of rural politics, if you will. There's a lot of, we call it modern day Mayberry, where everybody knows everybody's business, and so, you have to deal with this pandemic in a real way. I mean, it's affected, people in urban settings and rural settings. And so, we, much like you said, we tell our leaders to recognize it. I mean, we don't know all the answers. I mean, these are unprecedented times and, it's time for leaders to step up. But, we are all human and it's okay to show that human side. And I think teachers and parents and students appreciate that. I mean, so again, being completely transparent, having those communication in our building. I'm in the College of Education building at the University of West Alabama. We also share our space with the university charter school. So we have in our building, we started with pre-K 8 and we've added a grade every year until we reach to the 12th grade. But, we are very unique here. We're in a rural setting. We already had a one-to-one initiative. And so, the way that the charter school is handling this pandemic is totally different than those rural communities that we serve. And so when I think about, how do we help and how do we, support them and what kind of similarities do we have between urban and rural? Definitely number one is lack of Wi-Fi. The broadband issue in rural is real. And I'm sure you have families in an urban setting who also deal with lack of Wi-Fi. And that is a truly, truly issue and problem. However, we have very resourceful parents and students who, while McDonald's may be closed for inside business, their drive-through is still working. Well, we have families that will sit in the parking lot and access that free Wi-Fi, and complete their work online. Many of our rural schools allow parents to come to the school parking lot, because you can still access the school's parking lot Wi-Fi. So they're being, very resourceful like that. But not only lack of Wi-Fi, but the lack of devices. So many of our students are trying to do their work on a cell phone. It might be their parent's cell phone. Then you're faced with data packages. I've heard that, they're not really charging people for increasing data, but still a lot of the rural communities that we serve, they count every dollar, every penny, you know what I mean? And so they're afraid to go over those data packages. So we've had to be very creative, if you will, in a rural setting. So a lot of our schools have gone to sort of a blended approach to teaching the students. And by doing that, they're creating the learning packets that parents come and pick up. We do run buses, to the community, have a community pickup point, whether it's the church or local, whatever, for parents to pick up, because again, the commute to school is often an hour's drive. So we've been sending the buses out with these packets. In some cases, we have a few schools that have actually had enough devices that they could issue them to the students. And so they'll put the work on a flash drive. And so that way you don't have to have the Wi-Fi. You take the content, but then you have the issue of transporting the Wi-Fi, I mean, the flash drive, with the name and reloading the work. We also are doing what we call a flexible work schedule, practicing social distancing. And so we actually have, we'll have teams of teachers to come in the building, because they are saying the isolation, it really does get to you, and so they're practicing social distancing, but they will come and go into their classroom, and we'll still conduct business like we're doing right now, but you may be next door to me. And so as far as the school leaders, I loved your idea of letting the leaders see what they're creating. I'm going to definitely share that, Chandra, with some of these school leaders. But we're doing some of the same sorts of things. They're really working in teams to create the units, and they're dividing and conquering again, looking for those creative ways. The teachers, I must say, have gone Facebook. I mean, thank goodness for Facebook and those private groups. These teachers are singing and dancing and reading and, doing all sorts of things. And so you have to commend them for that. Other issues that we're dealing with, which I'm sure are very similar to you, lack of food. I mean, we've been running buses again to the pickup points for parents to pick up, food. Our parents are very frustrated. I mean, they didn't sign up to be a teacher. They didn't sign up to try to drive to McDonald's or back to the school to get Wi-Fi. And so, we're trying to be very compassionate, to those parents, and let them understand, we know that this is not your cup of tea, so to speak. Many of them are essential workers. I mean, they work in grocery stores, convenience stores, and so bless their hearts, they're doing the very best they can under these circumstances. So, that's been an issue. Of course, I know funding is a problem everywhere you go, but rural districts really and truly, we do face a funding issue, because we just don't have the dollars to be as creative as we'd like to be. So funding is definitely an issue. Another issue we're facing is services to our special education students. How do we do that, and what does that look like? And again, with that blended approach, we are working with the families to bring students in. So we may have a large classroom with only 3 students, and we still are practicing that social distance. It's just, if they can't do it via online, we've got to see them and make some contact to make sure we don't have the learning loss, as significant as it could be. So, that's been an issue. One thing creatively, teachers and leaders are creative people. And it makes my heart just swell when you see, of course, at the university, we have our student teachers who now are having to do their student teaching online. And so, the assignment may be to conduct a small group session in a reading class. Well, before, we might actually go observe that. So now they're recording their Zoom lesson or whatever mechanism, and they're doing a fantastic job. So, our student teachers are going to be able to put things on their resume that otherwise they would not have had the opportunity to do. So those are some issues that I see. We're probably alike in so many ways doing that. But when you talk about trying to keep the culture and the climate positive in a virtual setting, man, you guys are doing some great things, and very similar here. And so when I met with the superintendents, basically I said, number one, you've got to act with urgency. You can't be wishy-washy. You've got to make a decision, and you've got to go with it. Obviously, they have to communicate with transparency, and often, in whatever mechanism that is, definitely communicate. Our president at the university, pretty much, I would say 95% of the workers here at the university are remotely working. But his number one message to the deans, to all of us, is productivity must continue. So I'm holding you school leaders, the deans, accountable. How are you going to ensure that people are doing the job that they need to do? And, productivity is key. And so that is important. Teaching and learning, as you said, must go on. How do we ensure that those happen? I do think that engaging in constant updating is critical. And again, because these are unique times, we may or may not get everything right. And so as a school leader, I think making shared decisions with your team leads, department chairs, I would incorporate as much of that as I can, because it's just unprecedented in what we're dealing with. And, we have to also recognize, especially in small rural areas, like I said, everybody knows everybody's business. If you get tested for the coronavirus, we're going to know about it, whether you tell anybody or not. If you're positive, you know what I mean? And so sometimes you just have to recognize that. We start meetings the same as you. How are you doing? And if they volunteer to say, my grandmother has it, of course, we're sorry, we're thinking of you. Can we do anything? So compassion, I think, has definitely, taken a new level, creativity and compassion because of coronavirus. I mean, you can take a lemon and turn it into a lemonade, and that's what we're all trying to do. But again, visibility is key. I think keeping a daily schedule. So with my faculty, with my associate dean, school leaders, my suggestion is keep a daily schedule. We told our student interns, keep a log of what you do, when you do, holding people accountable, setting those timelines, just like if we were face to face, we have to continue to go on. We've worked with our faculty, and we've also worked with the schools. How do you give quality feedback to students during these times? Well, just like we're doing this, I could record a session and give you feedback versus just putting it in paper. So where we can conduct those one-on-one sessions, whether it's a teacher candidate or whether it's a fifth grader in the school, try to make the learning as personal and as face-to-face as you can. And obviously, where you don't have access to Wi-Fi makes it difficult, as well as many of the rural areas are weak in cell phone coverage. I mean, you can't even pipe sunshine into some of these places. They're so remote. So, we deal with what we have to deal with. But many of the same things you face, Chandra, I feel like, we're more alike than we are different. I can say that.
And I really appreciate everything you said, Jana, and I've jotted down some great ideas as well for the leaders in our district and some of our university partners that are on this webinar as well. So for the participants on the webinar, we hope that you are jotting down these great ideas, and it really is all about right now, I think, being innovative and creative as you make sure student learning stays at the core. And so when we think about student learning and student engagement, shifting us just a little bit, and then Erik, I want to bring you in. When we think about those learning experiences and how to make sure those connections are there with students, even though, again, they're not physically in the building, we're still teaching them. And we know when students are in our classrooms, engagement is key to learning. So let's talk about and think a little bit about what are those opportunities that leaders are seizing right now to increase that level of engagement. And every day, Jan, you and I both mentioned Facebook. Every day I'm on Facebook or on some of the school websites or just on the phone with principals, and they are just celebrating their teachers and their school commitment to maintaining that communication and relationship with students. Some of what I know that they're doing are things like the principal taking the lead and each morning reading a book to students. And so it's her moment to really have a read aloud, a student read aloud, and then that's posted on the school website or pushed out to families. And some of the messaging on the front end of that is parents, we're with you. We know you're busy. We know you're still trying to work from home. So, gather up all of your children and just have them sit on the couch together and click on your laptop and let them engage in some story time with me, the principal.
Yes.
Others are doing things such as this teacher leader who works with special education students. She had a virtual show and tell with her pre-K students, and she encouraged the parents to be on that session, on that call with her, and they all had their favorite animals, and they showed the animal, but also talked about how and why that animal was so special to them. And some just had a teddy bear, some had a dog, but why that animal was so special to them right here, right now. And we've had just this overwhelming response of warmth from and appreciation from our communities, because our leaders have connected with their entire school.
Right.
And have gone out into the communities and have engaged in staff parades. So social distancing, everyone is in their cars, and they have pushed out that message of the time and the routes that they will follow along the bus lines and through the neighborhoods. And they've encouraged everyone, put a sign out, tell us you miss us, we're going to tell you how much we miss you. So it's been staff parades all around our school district. And the response from parents, as simple as thank you, to posters and follow-up emails to the schools are saying our Johnny needed that.
Right.
This was so timely. Just things that we think have taken for granted that come so easily when we're inside of a school building. We now know how much it means, and really engaging students. It doesn't take a lot, but right now you have to be really thoughtful and making sure it happens often and in the right way. I'll give you another example. You mentioned, Jan, about the buses the bus drivers delivering lunches. So we have that occurring as well. We've had one principal that was at one of the stops and dressed as Captain America.
Oh.
And he just wanted, just for a moment, to show students, this, we too can work through this, and you're a superhero. You're a superhero, your parents are superheroes, and we're all in this together. So there's been lots of ideas sharing about how to really engage students. But again, when we think about that the learning piece, it is still where I shared earlier about the class tours, making sure that the learning is there. We also have lots of collaborative learning sessions that the assistant principal and the principal are peeping into, but collaborative learning teams that really discuss how are we assessing students, what other experiences do we need to maybe weave in a little bit more than maybe we have in the past in this virtual setting. So I want to bring Erik in, and Jan, please feel free to comment as well. But Erik, you are a director of eSchool. So you've heard Jan and me speak about our experiences from rural and urban and brick and mortar. Please join us in this conversation. So how is it different or the same in a virtual school, and what tips can you give us?
All right. Hey, thanks. It's really a pleasure to listen to the conversations here today. And it's really interesting because if you think about online learning, or you think about digital learning, whatever word you want to use, I think one of the biggest things that I think about is that typically with online learning, kids choose to do it, or kids and parents have made that choice to say, okay, I want to do online learning, where in most cases it's a choice. And in this case, when we're talking about a pandemic or a health emergency, suddenly it's not a choice anymore. And people are now being put in positions to do remote emergency online learning or remote emergency learning, however the best way you can do it. And as both of you have shared, there's all sorts of ways people are being creative and innovative to make that happen, which is outstanding and great for all the kids and schools and communities. I think what's really interesting about online learning in this case, for someone who's run a successful online school now for over a decade, is that online learning is an infrastructure, it's a backbone. And when you think about face-to-face and you think about online, in online learning, we have to create an online infrastructure that we have to be able to rely on and count on, and that works and is consistent, and people know the routines, procedures, just like you would in a regular classroom. So what's interesting about this scenario is when I listen to my colleagues that have face-to-face buildings or face-to-face schools, everyone's kind of rushing and trying to figure out this infrastructure, this culture of what it means to be online learners. And what's unique about us is that we have our infrastructure in place where if you're face-to-face, the infrastructure is really committed to a face-to-face infrastructure, which is perfect because that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be face-to-face infrastructure. Where to me now, and I heard the word blended learning thrown out there, I mean, I think what we're going to see here and what we're starting to see is that people are going to have to wrestle with the idea of what's the best use of face-to-face time. Face-to-face time is precious. I think when we see each other daily, sometimes it's almost taken for granted that, hey, I see you today, or hey, I see you today. I think I don't want to speak for anyone here, but I'm guessing that all of us have kind of figured out that casual hello interaction is precious, even though you see each other every single day. So imagine the teacher or the principals or the school staff, when you see those kids come in the building or when you see those kids in your class every single day, that may not be there, that moment of, wow, this is really precious every single day. It's almost like a relationship, right? When you have like a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and you see each other every single day, and all of a sudden you go a month without seeing each other, it's like, whoa, wait a second here, this isn't what this was supposed to be. And some of these circumstances now that we're in, we're starting to see that for us in our online school, our online infrastructure has really kind of carried us right now. And it's weird emotionally for me because I kind of feel like I should be like panicking and just using my systems to help do something. And what's really happening is we're just carrying out our routines and policies and procedures and work without a whole lot of big difference right now, and which is really hard because my kids are all home with me, my wife's home with me, just like everyone, most other people here. The biggest hard thing for me has just been adjusting and watching my kids adjust, missing their friends, missing their teachers. I'm missing my routine of actually going into a building. But what's really interesting on this whole thing is that the online infrastructure can continue to be counted on in this pandemic crisis situation. And that's not something that just miraculously appears overnight. This is something that's taken years to develop and fine tune and iterate and tweak. With collaboration from all sorts of people, not just in our district, but our Wisconsin eSchool network and colleagues across the country. I know that in Georgia, we collaborate with the Georgia virtual school folks. In Arkansas, I know that we collaborate as well nationally with Arkansas folks too for virtual learning. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but I hope I gave some information that helped there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think what I've taken away and wrote some notes about is that, you know, the online platforms can continue to be counted on, and for you have just continued to sort of operate as normal because this is how you do business every day. So I can just imagine, you know, schools like yours getting lots of inquiries right now about some best practices and what can be done to maybe ease the transition of this from not only for the students, but also just for faculty members. And so have you had lots of requests for support or just tips from across the country or other districts?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think what's really neat about our organization here in Wisconsin is our Wisconsin eSchool network, our collaboration, our consortium of partner districts and schools. We have a staff there too, and that's the organization I'm the president and chair of Emerging Technologies Committee, where we have a staff there that helps funnel those questions to staff that helps all those districts that are looking for that type of support. I think that one of the things I need to clarify for us, our Appleton eSchool, we're mostly a la carte 98% of our students come to school in our district, and we encourage them. We want them in school face-to-face, where they're taking 1 or 2 classes with us, a la carte style. We probably have 50 that do full-time online school for whatever reason, mostly local in our school district. But really, like, we want kids to go to school. We want them part of the community. We want them part of all the things I just talked about that we're missing, and that we're the routines of just seeing people. So I think that makes us a little bit unique. So we have staff, most of our staff work in a building as part of their contract and do online teaching. So really those staff, in my mind, have become go-to staff for teachers looking to transition and get help. Like, so they're master at their craft online with Appleton eSchool, and they're also a master teacher in the classroom as well. So I think about those teachers, the teachers that have both of those skill sets are in a position to be teacher leaders and mentors and folks to really look up to, who can really dance between both domains. And to me, that's kind of the future skill set, that as we go forward, can you do both domains? And where do we set up our infrastructure? Do we create an online infrastructure and then work backwards from there, like in the future here, or do we go back to the face-to-face infrastructure and then work backwards to online? So I think there's some really interesting questions to think about, is like, where do you create your infrastructure, and then where do you work backwards from to serve and meet the basic needs that we're all looking to do?
Hey, Chandra, I wanted to tell Eric one thing that I think will also happen in the future. The flipped learning concept is not new, but I think because we're forcing more teachers to go online, to put their content online, the idea of watch this recorded lecture or whatever it might be before you come to class. I'm thinking when we get back face to face, so you could actually save time and use more opportunities in the classroom to do project-based, hands-on group kind of scenarios. So I'm hopeful that some of the teachers that haven't used it in the past might consider that now that they've done it.
Absolutely. And Jan, your comment really leads us into some final thoughts that I want to gather from both of you. So,
Dr. Walker, if you wouldn't mind me interrupting real quick, we have a few questions from
absolutely.
the audience. Would you like to take those now, or would you like to do your final thoughts and then jump on these questions?
Let's see, how about we take a couple right now, and let me maybe pose, before we do that, let me pose the last question to Jan and Eric, and we'll let them sort of think about those, their responses, and then as they're thinking, we'll take a couple of questions. So the final question will be just thinking ahead a year from now, what do you think may be different after this pandemic is over, as it relates to leadership, as it relates to student learning, and the role of online learning? Both of you have sort of touched on a little bit. Eric, you touched on online learning, and Jan, you touched on some student learning, but just now, think about a year from now. What do you see in those areas, leadership, student learning, and the role of online learning? How will it look? So as you ponder those, your responses to that question, yes, we love to take a couple of questions from participants.
Okay, great, thank you. So we have the first question here. How do you support the learning of special ed students, EL students, and other students who need extra help, such as immigrants or refugees?
I can start if you'd like, because we are definitely dealing with, and we have one district that has the highest population of ELL students in the state of Alabama, and I think they have about 40% of their students are ELL. And so they definitely are looking at a blended approach. Those families often do not have the devices. They have, so the families are definitely bringing them into school for some of that face-to-face, practicing social distance. We just can't get away from providing services. Some are doing home-based as well. So whatever it takes to continue the learning as best that we can is what we've been doing.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, I think that in an online virtual scenario, I think one of the most important things to do is make sure your content that you invest into is screen reader capable, so that English language learners or immigrants or whomever is attempting to get the content, that it can be translated accurately and well. It also obviously helps to collaborate with your district's support staff, whether it's special education or English language learners and things like that, to have an adult as a coach or mentor with these families. And I know that takes resources, but at the same time, when we're helping families that are in these situations, I think that schools have services for that.
Mhm. And as it relates to our district, what I think two things are happening to support that effort. The first is how I spoke about earlier, the fact that administrators are making sure that those collaborative learning teams are still meeting and planning is happening. They're still discussing student work and ways that students need to be supported. So I think it still goes back to leadership and making sure that what you expected in your building is still happening right now. And the pop-ins that the leaders are doing while instruction is going on, I think is a way that we're ensuring that support still occurs. But also we have an extraordinary curriculum and instruction division at our school district, and all of those directors and those support teams are making sure that the resources that would have been available in the schoolhouse is still available in some way, shape, or form to students and teachers right now to prepare for this. What a lot of the curriculum instruction team did was make sure that teachers had proper training, that the leaders of those areas knew exactly how they needed to support, and they are there on a daily basis to help ensure that, again, the resources and the support is maintained. But I love what Jan said. It has to go on. Those services have to be provided, and we have just found a way to make sure that happens. But the monitoring of it is what the leaders have been charged with doing, and they're doing that well. I think we have maybe time for one more question, and then we can shift to Jan and Erik. And what I know will happen for all of the audience, we will make sure that our contact information is provided at the end of this webinar, and we're happy to continue the conversation. We want to continue the conversation, so please don't let just the end of this webinar stop this discussion. So is there another question or comment that we can address before we close out with our last comment?
Yeah, there is. And what I'll do is I'll send you guys the remaining questions so we can get them answered, and I'll get them out to the group as well. To quote this question, we have been a one-to-one for 4 years. We distributed a number of Wi-Fi devices for our high school students who don't have internet access at home. In spite of the absence of these resources, our data shows that only 30% of our students have accessed Google Classroom since closure. Any advice there?
Erik, any thoughts?
That's what I said, Erik.
Well, I think what the key observation there is that, again, we're talking about online infrastructure versus face-to-face infrastructure, and an online culture versus a face-to-face culture. And when you're in a online school, even if it's a la carte for 1 or 2 classes, that there's significant time and effort that's been put in on the front end to create that culture and expectation where people know what to expect. And I think right now it's really hard for anyone to know what to expect weekly, in some cases daily. So I know data is a big deal and it drives a lot of decision making, but I would almost say that right now, when you're looking at a 30% engagement rate, to me that doesn't surprise me right now when we're looking at a pandemic emergency situation. I think we should expect participation to be mixed, especially as you transition over. I think some of the things that we've heard from Chandra and Jan over here, that teachers and principals are doing extraordinary things to engage and connect with kids and families right now. And that engagement may not necessarily translate into online activity. It may translate into different things going on at home, things like that are not trackable or traceable in a learning management system like a Google Classroom right now. So I think we have to be careful to say that something is lacking when we don't even know what we're measuring right now in an emergency remote response to online learning. So I would like to caution on that a little bit, to say, okay, just keep doing the best that you can and pick out one or two things that ask your teachers to do really, really well. Communicate well with kids and show that you care. And if that's the bottom line that we have to work through at this moment to endure an emergency, I think that's okay. And I would hope that others would agree with me on that.
I definitely agree, Eric. And some of what is happening in our district are phone calls. So we are sort of tracking and monitoring the use of the digital learning, and communication then is being held with parents, actually, for praise and ongoing information on what strategies are working at home, because we see high usage, but also just connecting with those families that we don't see it as high, to find out, to Eric's point, is it because you are sharing one device, or is it because the parents are working during the day, so perhaps they are unable to assist their child? So the phone calls and the dojos and all of those measures are really to sort of find out what support may be needed, and find out, just get to the root of it. So those are just some examples and some suggestions I would just say. Jan, any final comment on that before we get 1 or 2 minutes from you and Eric about, in a year from now, what will this look like?
I think you nailed it, but I can go ahead to the year from now.
Okay.
I predict leaders are going to be much more creative and innovative. They're going to get their teachers skilled up in teaching online. I feel like the rural leaders in the rural communities are going to advocate and demand broadband access across rural areas. And I do think they'll start looking creatively at their budgets, writing grants to go to a one-to-one device, and probably more parent training, along the way, should something like this happen. That's are my predictions from a year from now.
Right. Thank you. Eric?
Boy, I have hopes for a year from now versus predictions. I hope that all of us humans will able to have taken moments to understand what's important to us and what's precious to us. And if online learning or face-to-face instruction is precious and important, then great. I hope that we continue to look at how important face-to-face interactions are, and not lose sight of that in the world of online. I mean, I think online learning is great. I think online learning has lots of potential still. I mean, online learning really isn't even innovative at this point in the game. I mean, honestly, it's been around for almost 20 years now, kind of in a place where it's been producing online content and a standards-based curriculum and things like that. So I wouldn't even say online learning is innovative. I think it comes back to the people again. I think it comes back to like our mindsets of how precious face-to-face time is, and what's the best use of our time in person, and what's the best use of our time to connect with people online and do the learning and show competency in our areas that we're trying to master. Those are my hopes.
Good.
Okay, and I echo what you just said, Eric, and I will add, I predict that for leadership and student learning in particular, that the innovation that we've captured in this last month or so, I do believe it will continue. I do believe that because of what we see as the response from parents, the appreciation of the increased levels of engagement, I think that parents will demand and leaders will want to keep this innovation going. I also think that across the country, more efforts or additional efforts would be put in place, perhaps to provide coaching to leaders on how to coach teachers and assistant principals in situations like this. So in an online environment, how to make sure that you are providing that feedback and that the extra measures for coaching so that we don't miss a beat at all if this ever should happen again. We hope not, but I think lots of lessons learned. And with that said, I want to just thank you, Erik, and thank you, Jan, for sharing your insights. And I believe now we will turn it over to Ken Spiro and his team for the last bit of insight regarding the use of simulation to support this same type of learning we're discussing this afternoon.
And thank you all, and thank you, Chandra, for leading that conversation. That was great. One of the things that is clear from whichever aspect of the conversation that one caught specifically is the need of communication, need for communication. And whether it's with students, whether it's from leaders to teachers, whether it's teachers amongst themselves, whether it's leaders to their bosses, whether it's the district or boards or whatever the case may be, with parents, it's really, really important that even though we're driven into isolation, right? So I imagine the infrastructure that virtual schools have from Erik's perspective, right? That's built in, right? Because that's the infrastructure is built that way because we have to be in communication. But that's really, really important. And so sometimes it's important to also make sure that we're able to drive not just singular focus, right? So clearly we're focused on the needs of our kids. And that's obviously critical. And student achievement is the clear outcomes that we're focused on. But in order to achieve that, sometimes we need to take a step away from what we're teaching and be able to focus on the manner in which we do it, the manner in which we operate, because there's going to be other stakeholders at play. There are going to be other issues at play, other trade-offs that need to be navigated that makes it murky in terms of how we make decisions and how we also act, that there's no one way of looking at it, right? So if we can drive communication amongst those who have to do, the opportunity to share, the opportunity to appreciate each other's companies and insights, that is going to be something that we'd like to provide an opportunity for, which is what the simulations are designed to do. We're really not going to have a lot of time to get into this, but I do want you to know that it's there. Is everybody, can you just confirm that my screen is being shown?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So when we're done with the webinar, which will be shortly, we will be sending out, Brian will be sending out the link to the recording of the webinar and an invitation to reach out if you want to know more. Obviously, we'll send out the contact information for each of the panelists if you have specific questions. And again, you can send them to us or to them directly, because we'd like to continue this conversation. But also, if you're interested in seeing more about this simulation as well as any of our other simulations as well. But this is something that we've been working on now, obviously over the last couple of weeks with both the folks in Gwinnett and University of West Alabama to get insights into what are some of the challenges that need to be discussed. And so, as with most simulations, there's no back button. So the issue here is to practice with decision making and to have to deal with it even if you make a bad choice or if the choice doesn't go as you might think. And one of the things we've incorporated in this from a decision-making perspective is to provide a little bit of a dashboard which gives you insight into the stress levels of your students, parents, and your faculty and staff. Because decisions you make are going to affect people in different ways from a social and emotional perspective. And this is just to get some insight to kind of track along the way with respect to how things are going. And really just to, again, get into just the very surface level of the sim. So it's you're a principal in an elementary school. It's part of a geographically large district, and the demographics are a broad range of race, ethnicity, and SES. The school year is nearing completion. You're approaching spring break, and recently news of an unknown illness has been receiving more press time so again, we're getting into this kind of circumstance. And your day's starting off and you get a knock on your door, and it's Mr. Newman, your newest kindergarten teacher. Do you have a minute? I have a brother who lives upstate and received a call from him late last evening, and he's been admitted to the regional hospital with some weird lung problems. I just got off the phone with the hospital. They say his condition is serious. I need to leave immediately. Can we combine my students with Miss Forrest's class for the next few days? You see the concern in his eyes and tell him to go, reassuring him that, of course, you'll make necessary arrangements for him. So this is kind of how we're starting now, entering into this. We could actually see the other cast of characters as it. Oh, we get an email from the superintendent. Hold on.
So
This is
real.
to inform you that due to the growing number of COVID-19 cases, we're considering closing schools. We need each of you to respond with a prioritized list of impacts this contemplated action will have in each of your schools. There are rumors that actions are being considered at the state level, so time is limited for us to consider impacts and determine strategies moving forward. And this will actually take us to our first decision point. And I'm just going to, we're not going to actually have the time to go into this because I know people probably need to leave. But just to see how we're dealing with this now in terms of provoking conversation, not the right choice, but to have to make a choice, right? You can see on the screen a variety of, there's 6 different choices you can select from. And one of the things we did in this instance is to put a timestamp afterwards, because it's important to be considering there's a trade-off, right? We might be able to do something like, we think getting an emergency response team, the 5th choice, may be something that comes obviously to mind, but bear in mind that's going to take you 2 days to do, or whatever time frame it is, right, to organize, to contact the right people, get their commitment, organize it, etc. And again, it's not to say that you wouldn't do some of these other things, but what would you do first? And one of the things that I just really wanted to, so this is kind of, it's a teaser. I'm going to leave it here. This is branched out. It's still in beginning stages, so we're still developing. We're interested in feedback if that's something that people are interested in participating in. But I did want to also just real quickly, and if I can just share this part of one more slide, and that's just, is the slide up?
Yes.
Okay, so just real quickly, just so the other topics that are going to be in SIM as the timeline evolves are going to be understanding household limitations, school lunch distribution, growing distributed teacher leaders, and adapting to distance learning. These are the variety of things that are going to take place over the span of time that we've simulated. But what's also important is that there are going to be trade-offs, things from a leadership perspective, such as being able to address challenges, and that's broken down, communication, encouraging others to lead. Are you working within your locus of control? Time is a factor, right? I mean, if you don't have more than 24 hours in a day, and you don't really have 24 hours in a day to actually do this work. So the question is, how are you managing from that perspective? And of course, budget is at play as well. But at the same time, there's those stress levels of social emotional issues that are manifesting, whether you're intending to or not, right? The role of communication, how we communicate, not just what we communicate, in terms of managing the different stakeholders who also operate differently. And so being able to have an experience where all of these things come together is the role that we look to have in a simulation. And in particular with something like this, which is evolving, we don't have answers. So we certainly can't get to quote unquote best practices, but we can get to having experiences that can be learned from. So with that, we definitely appreciate everybody's participation. I'm happy to stick around for questions for those of you who still have them and who can remain around. But again, to respect everybody's time, to thank our panelists very much for your participation and for your partnership. And we look forward to continuing that, and wishing everybody the best with this current circumstance. Everybody be healthy, or as healthy as possible and as sane as possible. And we'll look forward to being in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Brian, are there any questions?